Well, welcome into a very exciting episode of The Scene. I am your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today is therapist, podcast host, and founder of the Graybox Collective, Molly Schenk. Molly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bubba. So glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I found you in a Facebook group. You were looking to be a guest on some podcasts. You shared a little bit about what Graybox was all about, and I was
Yeah,
absolutely enthralled. So, why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and Graybox, and we'll just kind of go from there.
sounds good. So yeah, as you were saying, I am the founder and creative producer of Graybox Collective. And in a nutshell, we make weird art about tough stuff. And so weird art meaning that is experimental, it's interdisciplinary. The goal is to really push the field forward and try new things. And I think there's something about using that as the vehicle or the vessel for difficult conversations that's really helpful. Like we already go into this work without expectation of what it might look like. So therefore, I think it allows us to open up and really have conversations that are typically not conversations we have or might be taboo. And so that's Graybox Collective, and we are coming up on our 10th season, which feels wild on so many levels. And so then out of Graybox Collective, and the work that I've done for, oh gosh, 18 years at this point is really looking at like how can we create art around difficult things and difficult art making. And that has led me to really look at the intersection of trauma and creativity. And there's a lot about like on a neuroscience level that those things, the way they interact is just fascinating to me. And so I have trauma-informed creative practices, which is a methodology to engage in this work and create this work. And there's also the podcast for that as well, so that others can also learn about how to engage in difficult art making. Um, yes.
Yeah, I love it all.
Right there.
I love it all. I'm a songwriter myself, and how I've
Yeah.
always processed my trauma was in songwriting. It was
Yeah.
writing, it was using music and to describe a feeling. Well, it's hard to describe feelings sometimes, right? And it's hard to make art too. But
Yeah.
it seems like when you combine trying to get out those feelings with trying with making art, that it actually
Mhm.
becomes much easier, right? Art is
Yes.
how we express ourselves. It's how humans have always expressed themselves. So to do it, I think so many people put up a barrier. Well, I'm not an artist. Well, no, you
Oh,
are.
I
You're
see that.
human. You're,
Yes.
you create some kind of art. For a lot of
Mhm.
people, my father-in-law is a farmer. That's his art, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what
It's
he does has an
creative.
art form to it, and I'm sure it's some form of stress relief for him as well. He actually
Yeah.
just had a pretty traumatic leg injury, broke his leg, falling off some bales off the trailer, and now I worry a little bit about him because going
Yeah.
out and for us, we would look at walking through a hog barn and having to fix gates and kick pigs around as
Right.
something completely outside of ourselves that we'd never want to do. And what a terrible job. Well, that's what he's always done. And
Yep.
if that's your art form, that's how you get your stress out, right? I'm
Yep.
more worried about his mental capacity than the physical capacity in
Totally.
this moment. So I
Mhm.
love the weird art. I'm not a great graphic artist. I'm not a wonderful drawer or painter, but I was a welder.
Oh,
So making metal art and different things, not that I did a lot of it, it was always a job,
yes.
but having that different expression now that will serve me for the rest of my life, even though I'm no longer a welder, right? That we're able
Um,
to do that. So I just love the mission of what you're doing so much. It's so important. We have a show called Get Better Together where we just talk about it, right? We get on here and
yeah.
we're just honest with ourselves, maybe for
Right.
the first time. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's, it's not even that it's taboo to talk about certain things. It's taboo to share your feelings in this day and age and to not be shunned for it. So I commend
Um,
you for all of this work that you've done and that you continue to do almost 2 decades now of helping
yeah.
people process their feelings
Yeah.
and to let it go. I've
Yeah.
found my podcast to be therapeutic because I'm able to get some of these things out of me that have been there for decades. And
Yeah.
whether I release them to the world or not, they're out of me. They're on tape. They're in a file somewhere on my computer. I'm never
Yeah.
going to look for them, but they're
Right.
out of me.
Yes. Well, and what so much of what you just said, like yes to all of it. Like the completing of those stress cycles or completing whatever kind of like charge response we have to traumatic experiences. That is so important. And the arts are such a fantastic vehicle for that. Because it's a place where we can, like, especially with interpersonal traumas, it's a place where we can safely engage with each other again and learn how to be in those kind of heightened states, but in a way where we feel comfortable and we're able to be social and engage. And that's one way that the arts are really powerful, especially when you are creating collaboratively. And the interplay between trauma and creativity. So, one part of a traumatic response can be diminished creativity. And if we engage in creativity, it also helps us move through that trauma. So I think it's fascinating how trauma can take creativity away from us. And if we somehow muddle through and still engage in creative acts, whatever your creative act is, whether it's gardening on the farm, writing songs, that can also bring you back through it.
Well, and it's transmuting that energy, right?
Yeah.
Like this thing happened to you. It doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to stick with you forever, but very few of us are equipped with the tools to
Yeah.
transmute that terrible thing into something that's going to strengthen and empower us. And
Yeah.
I've put myself in a lot of terrible situations, prison and listeners of our show hear me go on about my stuff, but it's been my ability to look at myself with clear eyes, to look at the situations, and then to have an outlet for that. Whether that
Yeah.
is talking, not everybody's comfortable talking like I am. It's how you get 120 episodes in 6 months, right? You don't get there because you're afraid of talking about your
Right.
feelings and
Yeah.
talking about the things that happen to you. So what a
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful thing that you're
Yeah.
doing and how
Thank
many
you.
lives that you've changed because of it. It's just incredible.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And like speaking of talking, so I was actually nonverbal as a kid. And so to have all these different avenues of expression, I think it's one reason I got into the arts
Right.
was needed ways to communicate beyond just the voice. And I worked with when I was little, and I only know this through stories. Like I do not remember being in speech therapy before I was 2 years old, but the speech therapist said my nonverbals were very sophisticated for a kid that wasn't verbal. And so I think there's something in the wiring that I have just naturally that I'm really drawn to like multiple modes of expression. And that leads to that experimental interdisciplinary art making. Because I do like to tap into multiple streams.
Well, and it's what brought you to now being nonverbal and getting all of your feelings out in these other ways is what's led you to this, right? Like, without getting overly religious or anything, but like God made you like that for a reason, and it gave you this gift of expressing yourself through art and through other means than
Yeah.
just talking, right? And now you're able to turn that into something that you've helped people with for decade, almost 2 decades now, and that you're going to continue, I hope, for the rest of your life to
That's the
continue to
plan,
do.
yes.
So are there other, kind of companies and things out there that you know of that are doing the same thing that you are with Graybox Collective, or is this a very, just you are out here doing this?
Yeah, so there's definitely companies out there doing very similar work. What I find that sets Graybox Collective apart is that we are focused on somatics, meaning we're focused on the body, and we're also focused on adults. There's a lot of programs out there doing this work specifically for youth in the US. And my thing is like, cool, but at some point, like the youth grow up and you don't suddenly like get a clean slate, right? Like we still need those avenues as adults. And when you look at the age, there's like we hang out as adults a lot longer than we hang out as youth. And so that's something that I think is really important about Graybox is that we offer something that maybe a lot of kids got, a lot of humans got growing up, but then at some point it fades away. And so it's really important to keep connected to the arts and stay in that state of creativity and play and being able to create art around it, right? In a way that's still really meaningful. I think so often we can kind of get into this like art for art's sake and like what's the point of the arts and the arts aren't always valued But being able to continue to use those performances or whatever as these artistic vehicles for social change, like you can really start to shape the world around you a lot more.
And I think that the societal problem is that we've elevated certain artists, right? Rock stars, movie stars, to make it look like it's unattainable. That only they are able to do art. Like leave art to the professionals. No, art is how humans express themselves.
Yes.
That's why we have art class for
Yes.
2-year-olds, right? Like because they know how to maybe draw or express this feeling that they have with a picture or with a piece of clay better than they can. Like, how do you lose that? You
Right.
know?
Yes, exactly. I actually there's an artist in LA who has was did something commissioned that says artists are the pollinators of culture and truth. And like, yes, whether that is our own culture and our own truth, or whether that is something that we are reflecting to the world around us, I think that is a huge a very important thing that we do tend to lose as we grow up, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, life beats you down. You go through the system, you go to college, you're in school, you're slammed with homework, you're trying to have a social life, then you get out, you have a job, you're working 60 hours a week. Like it's very easy to get
Yeah.
beaten into it by what we're seeing in our culture. Now, I think we're about to go through a massive cultural shift over
Yeah.
the next few years. I mean, it's not just what I see. I don't really watch the news, but obviously new
Yeah.
president and a lot of things changing and is in the physical reality, but there
Mhm.
is something in the ether right now that's changing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't been going out and looking for Molly Schenk to interview. It's been coming to me, right? It's
Yeah.
been drawn into this thing and realizing that we are all of our own vortices, right?
Yeah.
And when you draw in what interests you with the
Mhm.
power of the internet, if you're able to kind of unlock this thing, then
Yeah.
you're going to build a beautiful life for yourself. And finding this is all from God, right? And I'm not an overly religious person, but I don't have any other word for it that somebody else is going to understand, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't bring this at all. I'm in this group of 50,000 people. How do I
Right.
stumble across your post out of all of that?
Right.
It's been
Yeah.
fed to me. So
Yeah.
whatever algorithm, right, that brought us together,
It
I am
works.
so grateful because what you're doing is even cooler than I could have even imagined.
Well, thank
Um, what what's the future of Graybox Collective? I know you got the podcast and you have your therapy and everything going on like this, but I see Graybox Collective is something that could be worldwide, right? This could be something that's much greater than just you and a single studio. So, what is kind of your vision for the future of the
you. Yeah.
Graybox Collective?
Yeah. Well, and I'll also talk a little bit about my somatic movement therapy because it does very much intertwine. It's very similar work that I'm doing, but some of it's one-on-one and some of it's in group settings and in Graybox. And so, right, still using the arts as that vehicle for transformation. And I like transformation because like there's some kind of evolution there. There's like a groundswell that comes with it. And so thinking about the future of Graybox Collective is really starting to train other people more in this work. And so I have a mentor.
Franchising essentially your
Yeah,
ideas and your methods and getting this out here. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to hear.
yes, yes. And so like right now we've just rebooted our Patreon page, which is Play in the Gray, and it's an initiative of really understanding how can we as artists, as entrepreneurs, as arts leaders, be existing in these unknown, like messy gray areas of life. And as you said, like we're going through a big transition in the US. And like, I don't know if you follow spirituality and like astrology at all,
Oh
but like,
yes.
okay, yeah. So
Yeah,
yes,
I felt that alignment on the 25th of January, right? And
there we
everything
go.
after it has been just accelerating at one of the
Yeah,
fastest pace. I've never experienced anything like this in my life.
exactly, exactly. And so we started Play in the Gray to really share our values in terms of not just how we make art, but also how we run our business. And so with that sharing out, like this is what we've been doing all along. And this is something that I think other people are really needing right now is how do we still exist in this uncertainty and somehow shape and carve out some solid ground underneath us. And so it's looking at how we stay creative. It's looking at trauma-informed practices as well. It's looking at how we embody this, because what you were saying, right? We're so disconnected, mind and body, and so much of what we're doing in the world, like working 60 hours a week, what we're, life beating you down, as you were saying, a lot of that is forcing us to disconnect from ourselves. And so how can we stay connected to ourselves and bring all of that into how we are running our organizations? And I think that's what's really necessary moving forward. And that's what Play in the Gray is hoping to be a catalyst for. So that's the big push right now. But I also have the mentorship trainings and some group coaching to support that work. Maybe on more of an individual level in some places, but yeah, like there's definitely ways to plug in and embody this work.
Right. Well, and like the idea of playing with art and and dealing with your trauma and things like that through that is great, but also you kind of want to be in a safe space, right? You kind of want to be with someone who's a professional, so you
Yeah,
can't just go out and make a million people that can do what you do overnight. It takes time, it takes a community, and it takes people being willing to invest in themselves, right? To be able to show
totally.
up and to do some art and to work through their
Yeah.
stuff as well.
Yeah, you have to really be okay with like meeting yourself and like holding that mirror pretty damn close with like how you're showing up in the world and how you're showing up in community. There, like even when you think you've really like done the work, whatever the work is, right? Um, how are we still like kind of excavating, right? Digging deeper. I call it in like healthy downward spiral to really go deep within ourselves. And, I've been doing this work for 18 years and it still surprises me when I'm like, oh, okay, we found something new to unpack later. So it's really, I think, important work. But there's something about the familiarity of that downward spiral of being able to circle back to things and just get deeper that really, like, I'm in it for the long game. I think it's sustainable, and just really understanding kind of the rhythm and cycle of it all.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of our trauma is like an everlasting gobstopper, right? Like there's just layer upon layer upon layer, and
Yeah,
you think you got it eaten, and then you're
right.
choking on it again, and you're
Yeah,
coughing back up, and
yeah,
you're having to dig some more. And
right. Well, when we were doing a piece about grief, I think that was one of the things we kept talking about was like we think of it as like, oh, this trauma or this grief happens like, and then like you go through your grief cycle and then it's all done. But no, like this stuff accumulates. It happens over and lapping each other. It would be lovely if we could just like take one trauma and work through it, and then like the next one comes along. But that's not life. We have to figure out how to be kind of in multiple cycles and multiple relationships with whatever that is that we have been experiencing simultaneously. Hence the messy part of life that we exist in.
well, and I got a great example for you before I let you go. Just a few weeks ago, right? So my granny's birthday is the 27th of January. So right after we go through this massive cosmic shift, right? We lost her 2 years ago. It was just last week, right? So it was, or this week of this was Granny's birthday, and then her death date, or a weird term, but the end of her natural life, right, was later on that week. And I have a cousin that has a birthday, I think the day before she passed away. She sang her happy birthday and saved her last breath for that, right? And in working last year, I was so busy that I never really dealt with the grief. In my way, when I found out, because she had had a cancer 20 years ago, beat it, experimental medicine with the chemo, the whole thing. And it was always, look, if it comes back, it's going to be aggressive and it's going to be very, right, like it's going to be very bad. Well, we found out in September of, it must have been 22 or 23, that it was back, right? And it was moving fast. It was already in multiple places, right? So the way that I kind of grieved her before I ever let her go, before she was ever gone, and I
Yep.
wrote this song called Everlasting, talking about how time's everlasting, but time never lasts, right?
Oh,
Like it can be both of these things.
yeah.
And when her birthday came around this year, I wasn't even thinking about it. And I read my aunt made a Facebook post and it just brought it all up. And for me, my outlet was kind of my blog, right? My message to the people who follow me, to the 500 people on our email list. And I just put it on my website about how much I love my granny,
Oh,
and how I'm not going to remember this day as a sad day. I'm going to remember all the love that you had for me and every
oh,
single good memory. And I just let them flow, and I let those words flow. And now I'm able to not just share this once,
mhm,
but I was able to put it on my website where it'll be immortalized forever, right? And to send that to my aunts and my aunt and uncle and my mom, and to be like, this is who she was, right? Like we don't have to just live with the memories. We can tell everyone else too. And yeah, it was a very powerful day, right? And
oh,
realizing that in that year that I had never really cried, right? When she passed away, it was like, oh, well, it's done now,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But not thinking that in 2 years it was going to come back around when I was taking a little more time for myself, when I
when you have
was
that
in tune.
space.
Yeah,
Mhm,
well, I give myself space. I got an altar right next to me here in my studio that I pray at every day. I'm a lot more in tune with who I am, who I've always been now than in years prior. I got wrapped up in that. After I got out of prison in 2018, I went to work right away. You got to be a man and you go to work for your family. And I headlong into all of that. And
mhm,
then last year, quit the welding job in the factory. I
mhm.
thought I was going to be a rock star, Molly. I thought, I was on
Very
the
well
I was
done.
on the
Mhm.
local TV station playing my songs, and I thought that's what I was being called to do, was to go be that person. And
Yeah.
in fact, it was this now, right? It was over the course of the year finding podcasting,
Mhm.
realizing not only was I good at it, but I love it. I love meeting new people and getting
Yeah.
to know you and your story. And I say, this is how God is healing the whole world, right? We are talking, God is speaking through us, sharing our stories. This is how you actually fix a planet, right? It's not by, some crazy initiatives and pieces of paper signed by another human being in a building that we just put a lot of reverence on. That
Yeah.
doesn't change things. Human beings change things. And you can't
Mhm,
change anything about your outside world until you change stuff about your inside world. And I
mhm.
think that just with the success that my little podcast has had in the last month and a half, right? Of the interesting conversations that I've got to have, that
Mhm.
now I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what this is. And people are really getting into the content. People want to be healed. We don't
Yeah.
want, I love Joe Rogan. I listen to his podcast all the time, but I don't need to watch him and his buddies beer bonging, and doing bong rips. And like, I don't need to watch that content anymore. I
Yeah.
think there's people that are interested in a lot deeper content, and not that Joe doesn't have some great people on that do get deep. It's realizing that, like, that's what people want now. They want the deep conversations.
Yeah.
They want to know themselves
More.
better by getting to know you.
Yep, totally. And what you were just saying, like that are how our internal world and our external world are reflections of each other. Like that's a lot of the work that I do with clients. It's figuring out like how are we moving through life and how is that actually shaping our external world, right? Because we hear it all the time about like, oh, I got to push through this week. I got to pull it together. I just, I've got a lot on my mind and my head, my shoulders, all of that. That's all going to be actually physicalized in our bodies.
Well, it's
And so,
just survival. You're just in
yeah,
survival mode. And as someone who's experienced homelessness and experienced living in another country on the run from felony warrants in the United States, like,
yeah,
I know what survival feels like. Just
mhm,
because I can operate there and I can survive doesn't mean that that's the way I need to live my life. And I feel like there's so many people out there that are living in survival mode, right? If you're paycheck to paycheck, you're in survival mode. And
yeah,
most of our country, and I would say most of the planet, is in that all the time. And
mhm,
we're all trying to figure out, like, how do we fix this? And
yeah,
you can't, there's nothing out there that's going to fix you if you're
mhm,
not willing to go in here. If you're not willing to go in and go, oh man,
yeah,
I got some stuff I need to work on, and things to do that. And what a great outlet for it to do art, right? Whatever that art may be,
yeah,
writing or podcasting now, or it's doing physical art or just moving. I work out incessantly, right? I have to walk 2 miles a day. We have to work out, my wife and I, because that's how we shut the demons out. That's how we shut the outside world out that tells us that we're not good enough. So, Molly,
yeah,
I commend you so much for the work that you've done and all the work that you're going to do. And I'm so glad that we got to meet and chat today. Can you
right.
go ahead and plug everything that you can, and we'll get you out of here? I'm sure you're a busy lady.
I appreciate it. So probably the easiest way is to go to grayboxcollective.com, and that's gray with an E. And from there, you can find our Patreon page with Play in the Gray. You can find our podcast, Any Other Anythings. You can find out more about trauma-informed creative practices, as well as more of the work that I do. So yes, Gray in the Graybox Collective is probably going to be the easiest way to get there.
Excellent. Well, Molly Schenk, thank you so much for being a part of the scene.
Well, thank you, Bubba. Appreciate it.